On the record in the case of People versus Davion Thompson, the records reflect the jury is not present at this time. Anything for the record, Mr. Fedoric?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. O'Farrell?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Fedoric, do you have your witnesses lined up to proceed today?
We do, Your Honor.
All right, bring the jury in.
You two working today.
I've been told yes.
Thank you.
Please be seated. Morning, everyone. Two things I want to tell you. First of all, so you can plan your lives accordingly, I anticipate that the testimony in this case should wrap up tomorrow afternoon from talking to the lawyers. But even if it doesn't, we will not be in court Friday. All right, so you can plan your days accordingly. I want to let you know that. And secondly, I know some of you may have some concerns about the cameras and whatnot, and this being broadcast live on YouTube. I assure you, nothing is being said about you on camera. Your photos aren't being taken, your videos aren't being taken. And if that happens, they're gonna have to answer to me, and I don't think they want to do that. So I want to make you all know, don't worry about that, all right? Mr. Fedora, call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People call Dr. Canny Varani.
Morning, doctor.
Hey, Doctor, could you please state your full name for the record, spelling first and last?
Yes, my first name is Kanu, K-A-N-U. Last name is Virani, V-I-R-A-N-I.
Thank you, Doctor. And how are you employed?
I'm employed currently with the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office.
All right. And you were doing work as a medical examiner for Saginaw County cases back in 2018, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, could you just describe for the jury your education and medical training with respect to forensic pathology?
Yes, I finished medical school in India. That was completed in 1979. I did 1 year of internship that was completed in 1980. Came in United States in 1981. Did 4 years of pathology residency training at Northeastern Ohio University in Akron, Canton area. Completed that in 1987. And then I went to New York University for fellowship in forensic pathology for 1 year. That was completed in 1988. Worked for medical examiner's office in New York City for a couple extra years. Came in Michigan in 1991, and since I've been working in Michigan, originally started with Oakland County, but then I was providing forensic pathology consulting services for the counties, other counties like Saginaw and Bay and Midland counties.
And then can you just tell the jury how many autopsies you performed?
I may have done even more than 20,000 autopsies in Michigan since last 31 years.
And approximately how many times have you testified?
Thousands of times, I should say.
Thank you, Doctor. Your Honor, the people would move to qualify Dr. Varani as an expert in forensic pathology.
Mr. O'Farrell.
I am familiar with Dr. Barani, Your Honor. Good morning, doctor, and I would stipulate to his expertise.
You will be so recognized.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Doctor, do you recall performing an autopsy with respect to an Antonio Parham?
Yes, I do.
And when was that done?
It was done on January 29th, 2018.
And if I may approach, Your Honor,
You may. Yeah. 30 is the copy of body diagram I was using to write certain information on a human body on the front and back. Whatever injury or abnormalities I would note while examining the body. 31 is the back page of the same with the notes I would write at the end of the autopsy or finishing autopsy, that what were my findings in the different areas like head to down all the way to the toe.
Your Honor, I'd offer
Mr. O'Farrell.
No objection.
Exhibits 30 and 31 will be admitted.
and I'd ask for permission to publish People's Exhibit 30.
You may.
Now, Doctor, so again, you performed the autopsy on Mr. Parham on January 29th, 2018.
Correct.
Okay. And then with respect to your findings, did you find injuries on Mr. Parham, and what injuries did you find?
Yes, I did find injuries. In a summary, he had 9 gunshot wounds in his body, in a various part of the body areas. 3 of them were in the chest, other 3 were in the left upper arm and shoulder area, 2 in the right leg, and the last one in his buttock area.
And Doctor, would it help to refer to the diagram to describe those?
Correct. That would be helpful. As you can see in the front part of the body, which should be on the right side, it shows 3 circular marks on his.
And Doctor, sorry to interrupt, but if you want to step off the witness stand and just point it out on the chart.
It's very difficult for me to see from here. Maybe my old age or something like that.
No, it's not your old age, it's the distance. If you could perhaps stand at the projector itself, Doctor.
I can do that.
And can everyone see that monitor? Because I'm sure you can't see across here. At least I can.
So Doctor, you can just point out on the diagram and then everyone will see on the monitor.
So this is the front part of the body, and you can see 1, 2, and 3 circular marks. And those are the 3 bullet entered from the front of the chest into the body. They went through the rib cage, through the left lung, through the liver, aorta, and if you can follow on the back part of the body diagram, there are 2 circles. Actually 3 circles, 1, 2, and 3. Out of that, 1 circle is the one where I'm pointing, is the bullet exiting from the body. The other two dotted circles are the one where the two bullets were recovered just behind the skin, corresponding to those three entered from the front of the chest. Other injuries you can see in the back part of the right upper limb, in the shoulder area where I'm pointing, the bullet entered from the back. It went through the muscle and the right humerus bone in the shoulder area. And the bullet was recovered from the area just behind the skin in the same shoulder. So it went from back to front and slightly upward. And the bullet was deformed as it was going through the bone in the shoulder. The other one is near the elbow, where it entered from back of the elbow, went through the muscles, and came out from the side of the right elbow. The third one is entering from the back of the forearm, just above the wrist area, went through the muscles of the forearm, and came out from the front of the forearm, as you can see from the front body diagram I have drawn. The two gunshot wound on the leg, right leg, I should say. One is above the knee area, which entered from the back of the body, went through the thigh muscles, and came out from the front of the right leg, just above the right knee. The next one is entering in the back of the right leg. It went through the knee joint itself and came out from the inner aspect of the or front part of the right knee. And the last one is entering into the lower part of the right buttock area. It went upward and went through the gluteal muscle, and the exit wound, I should say, is where the body or the bullet exited from this area. So it went upward. Now, different directions may indicate the movement of the person while being shot. So it's difficult for me to say other than telling you upward in a way that I would presume he was standing up at the time of shooting, but it could be adjusted according to his position at the time of shooting.
And so, doctor, a total of how many entry wounds did you find?
9 bullets entered in his body.
And then a total of how many exit wounds?
6 of them were exit wound, and 3 bullets recovered, 2 from the back and 1 from the shoulder.
Now, in your examination of the body, did you find any gunpowder?
Not on the body itself. We looked very carefully in and around the entrance wounds to see any evidence of gunpowder residue, to give us any idea whether the gun was held closer to the body or not. I did not find anything, but he was taken to the hospital where his clothing were removed. And I did not get opportunity to examine his clothes. They were taken by the police to the crime lab, and somebody must have examined those clothing and done testing on it. That person can tell you much better way if there was any gunpowder residue in the clothing area around the bullet holes.
And then as far as you mentioned, there were some bullets that you found inside the body, correct?
Yes,
And how many again?
3.
Okay. And what was done with those?
Those were photographed by the detective who was present at the autopsy, and they were taken by him with him at the police department.
And can you just describe the effect of those bullet wounds that you found? Examination of the body.
Yes. Main effect would be, of course, the bleeding. Those 3 bullets entering in his chest went through the lung, the liver, aorta. So they are very vascular organs. So they start bleeding profusely inside. And person end up losing the blood. When somebody loses blood, 40% of the total volume, person becomes unconscious and die from that. And it does not take more than few minutes for that much blood loss to happen because of the perforations of vital organs. The other 6 bullets went through the various part of the arm and leg. Of course, they would bleed, but not as profusely as the other 3 wounds in the chest. But that will give a lot of pain, and the person survives. Person may survive out of those 6 wounds if proper treatment is given. The other 3 wounds, it is almost impossible to keep him alive, because even if you take him to the hospital because of the injuries, which would bleed profusely in a short time.
Thank you, doctor. And from that, were you able to determine the cause of death?
Yes, his cause of death was determined to be multiple gunshot wounds,
And then the manner of death?
classified as a homicide.
And doctor, you can have a seat again.
Thank you. Yes, these are the photographs of the bullets recovered from his body. The number 34 has a smaller fragment in upper photograph, which is the fragment of the bullet recovered from the shoulder area.
35.
35 is a copy of the autopsy report. I signed it after completing the entire report on February 19th, 2018. It is altogether 8-page report describing all the injuries and his internal organs dissection. Although he was a young man, there were no other natural diseases found during the autopsy, but still it's a description of every organs. Correct.
Part 32, 33, 34, the photographs, those are 2.5 years.
Yes, that is correct too.
Mr. O'Farrell.
And I have no objection. I would indicate that on the proposed exhibit list, it refers to the photographs of depicting shell casings, at least on my list. And that's wrong. But I'm assuming that will be corrected before the jury will get the list.
Well, they won't get this list.
They'll get a corrected list or,
They won't get a list at all.
oh, okay,
They'll get the exhibits themselves.
okay.
So exhibits 32 through 35 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Questions, Mr. O'Farrell?
Doctor, in the services that you were performing them for Saginaw County, you were not summoned to crime scenes except in extraordinary situations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in this particular case, you were not summoned to the crime scene.
That is correct.
The clothing had been removed before you examined the body, if I understand correctly.
Yes,
And you indicated that you found no evidence of gunshot residue. Is that correct?
on the body, in and around the bullet entry areas, I did not find any on the body. Yes,
Okay. And that gunshot residue would be from a gun being fired in close proximity to the person. leaving some evidence of the explosion firing the bullet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But if the person were wearing clothes, then likely that would get onto his clothes and not penetrate to the body. Is that what you're concluding?
Yes, the clothing, particularly in the month of January, probably was wearing more than one layer of clothing. And that would filter out the gunpowder residue before coming in contact with the skin.
And you indicated, based upon your medical expertise, that you believe someone else would have checked the clothing to see if such residue were present. Is that correct?
Yes, usually it is done by the Michigan State Crime Lab in Bridgeport.
Doctor, you have these bullet wounds listed by number. Is that necessarily the sequence in which the bullets were fired, or can you make that determination?
No, as a forensic pathologist or medical examiner, I or other forensic pathologists cannot make determination of sequence, which one came first and which one came last, because all the bullets entered in his body at very fast in a small time range. So there is no healing process in between the wounds body can do. Based on those healing process, we can determine the sequence, but in this one, we cannot. Numbers are given just for my own convenience of description in the autopsy report. So I can refer to gunshot number 1 to 9 when somebody asks me which one is which.
Doctor, just generally speaking, without going into the detail that you previously described, apparently 3 of these wounds to the chest were entrance wounds from the front, and the other 6 were in the general direction from back to front. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. Fedor?
No, Your Honor.
Doctor, you may step down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge.
People would next call Lisa Curtis.
Ms. Curtis, if you come forward and be sworn, please. Take the witness.
Morning, Ms. Curtis.
Good morning.
Could you please state your full name, spelling first and last for the record?
Yes, it's Lisa. Last name is Curtis. It's Lisacurtis.
Thank you. And you know why you're here, and it's an incident that occurred back in January 2018. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that and some background questions as well. Now, given the time period, can you tell the jury where you were living on January 27th, 2018?
In Camelot Apartments, in apartment M1 in Saginaw.
And that's Saginaw, Michigan, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Now, as you know as well, a lot of this case revolves around your two twin boys. And I'm gonna ask you some questions about them. And I know it's difficult for you to talk about this, as you know, what happened to them and everything. But we're just gonna have to get into that, and I'll just ask you to answer the questions as best you can, okay?
Sure.
Now, the two sons you had, what were their names?
Brandon and Cameron.
All right, and they're twin brothers. They're born at the same time.
Yes,
correct?
they are. They were twins. Yes.
And now both of them died. And I'm
Yes.
just going to ask you about Cameron first. Can you tell the jury when Cameron died?
My son Cameron passed June 26th of 2016.
And then Brandon shortly after.
Yeah, and then I lost my other son Brandon the following year, November 4th of 2017.
Now, do you know Davion Thompson?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
He was friends of my boys.
So he was friends with both Cameron and Brandon.
Yes, he was.
And so how long had you known him?
I've known him for some years.
Would you have considered yourself close to him?
Yes.
And did you call him by any other names?
Yes, he has a nickname, Tubbs, Tubbs.
And did you have a lot of conversations with him? Like, did you talk to him specifically a lot?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And how about after your sons had passed away?
Yes, I did.
So you maintained contact with them?
Yes.
And then after your last son, Brandon, died, would you say you spoke to him more or less after that?
About the same.
Now, I'm going to focus a little bit here on Brandon's death. So that was in November 2017. Now, were you involved in that investigation of how he died?
Yes, I was working with the detectives. Yes.
And what was your understanding as far as how he died?
That he was shot.
And that was kind of the same thing that had happened to Cameron as well.
Yes, Cameron was shot as well. And yeah, the murderer that killed my son Cameron is in prison for 30 years. So I went through court and trial and everything for that.
And then after going through all that, Brandon dies, and then you had to go through it again as far as.
Brandon died a year later. Yes.
Now, just with respect to that investigation, and let me know if you need to take a break, let me know, and I'll just give you a minute, okay?
Okay.
As far as the investigation to Brandon's death, were there specific detectives that you were working with?
I worked with a lot of detectives, Detective Jacobs, Detective Bush, Wenzel, Wortley, so a few different detectives. Detective Bush Detective Bush and Jacobs handled my case with Cameron, and I worked with them primarily with Cameron's passing, and then with Brandon, Detective Wortley, and I had sent a few messages to Detective Bush as well.
And so the messages that you sent to them was, what was that you were passing on to them?
Information that I would hear, I would pass it along to them.
And then, are you able to recall specifically today what information you received that you passed on to the department?
Yeah, I did pass on that I had heard that Tone had killed my son Brandon. I passed along information as far as hearing where he might stay in Bloomfield, and that's an apartment complex. Just, yeah.
Okay. And As far as that information, do you recall where you obtained it?
Yes, through emails and texts, both.
And I'm referring to where you actually got it from.
Yes, through Tubbs. And through
Were there
other people, yes. There was also a guy named Jamal that had gave me some information. And then two guys at the Marathon gas station. Don't recall their names. I don't know them well like that, but they had told me some information as well.
And so are these people that were friends of your sons? Would you say that?
Yes, I would say Jamal knew my son. Yes, he was right. Yes.
So the information they were giving you, is that information they were getting from other sources?
Yes. Mhm.
And you weren't necessarily given those sources or told everything about how they got the information, were you?
No, no.
Now, the specific information that you told the jury you gave to the department. So with respect to this Tone fellow, did you know his full name?
Antonio Parham.
You know that now, correct?
Yes, I know that now.
At the time, did you know his full name?
No,
You just knew him by tone?
just by tone, yes.
All right. And then you had some information that he stayed in Bloomfield.
Yes, and then also some information that Jamal had texted me that he had paid some, he said the exact word, clucks, which I'm assuming means drug addicts, and they had said that Tone had did it.
Okay, all right. Did you ever get a direct or a specific address for Tone and Tony Parker?
No, I never did.
Now, just to clarify, you said that you relayed this information to the detectives. You said by messages or by emails.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Did you contact them by phone or anything like that ever?
No, everything was pretty much handled through, with the detectives by text.
All right. People in exhibit 13. Flip through the pages and make sure you recognize that.
Yes, I do.
That's something you recognize.
Yes.
And what is it?
This is information that Jamal had sent to me that I passed along to the detective, Wortley and Detective Bush.
All right. Now, this is a document. It has a date on it. It's like January 24th, I believe is the date. Now, was this information that you gave them previous to forwarding this to Detective Wortley?
Yes,
Okay. And so.
I think this is the day they may have printed this out because I sent that a little bit before the 24th, I'm sure.
All right. Now, it seems to be, it might be the date that it was sent to, that specifically was sent to Detective Wortley, but it's possible that, or you believe you gave the information to them prior to January 24th?
Yes, I believe, yes.
Okay. Now, and then the information in those, in that exhibit, does that reflect again, what you testify as far as what you relayed to the detectives?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned an individual named Jamal, and who is he?
He is a friend of Brandon and Cameron's.
And what about Davion? Was Davion friends with them that you know of?
Yes, they all knew each other, yes.
And do you know Jamal's last name?
I don't.
Is he someone that you communicated with very often?
He, not like that. He's someone that if I saw him, he would come up and say, hi, how you doing? Or Miss Lisa, but not as far as communicating just regularly, but
So it wasn't like Davion that
no,
you
no,
kept in close contact with?
no.
Now, what was the reason for you? I guess it's an obvious question, but what was the reason for you giving this information to the police department?
So they could solve the murder.
It's your son who was murdered, and you want the killer to be brought to justice.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Now, sounds like some of the information you got from Davion, some of the information you got from other sources. Did you, I guess, communicate all the information you had with Davion?
Yes, yes, I did.
So things like where Tone was living, or that he was staying in the Bloomfield area, that was something that you were aware that Davion knew of.
Yes, correct,
Okay. And the fact that the rumor anyway was that Tone was the one who killed your son.
correct, yes.
Now, did you ever obtain an actual address of Tone, for Tone?
No, I never did.
Okay. And so Davion never told you, this is Tone's actual address.
No, the only thing I knew was that he is out in Bloomfield sometimes.
Did he ever tell you that Tone was in the Bond Porter Lion area? Did he ever say that to you?
No, absolutely not. I've never heard that.
And, an address in that area, so kind of around the courthouse area, is that considered Bloomfield?
No, that's what they would consider the west side.
Okay. So Bloomfield would be where, as far as like north, south, west, east?
I'm not good with the whole direction thing, but they would consider it more going out towards Bridgeport.
Okay, so more south, east of you.
Yes, they're not close at all.
Now, obviously you would have been upset with whoever it was who would have killed your son.
Yes,
All right. Now, there's a few people here involved, sounds like, in gathering information. Did anyone indicate to you that they had an intent of killing Mr. Parham themselves?
no,
So this Jamal fellow, you ever talk to him about killing Mr. Parham?
no, he never said anything like that.
Any of these crackheads or anyone you may have met at the gas station, did those people say anything to you about wanting to kill Mr. Parham?
No, absolutely not.
Now, just gonna ask you about your contact with Davion. So did you communicate with him by phone?
Yes, by phone. Mhm.
Okay. And I guess after Brandon died, were you aware of how, let me ask you this, was there anything significant about Davion's phone, where he got it from?
My son Brandon had gave Davion the phone that he had probably about 3 or 4 months before he had passed.
And was that a phone that you had provided to Brandon, or is it a phone Brandon got on his own?
No, it's a phone that I had bought my son, and then he wanted a different phone, so I got him a different phone, and he gave that one to Davion.
Okay. And do you recall today what the phone number for that phone was?
It's been a couple years, I think, 989-475-4365. Something close to that.
And just to refresh your recollection,
Yep, 475-4365. Yes, most positive, yes.
So whenever you contacted Davion, was that number?
Yes, always on that number.
Did you ever contact him at a different phone?
At the end, I had to contact him one time on his cousin's phone, Garland.
Okay. Now, what was the number, and you've changed your number since?
Yes,
But what was the number that you had at the time prior to the Antonio Parham murder?
it was 989-714-7663.
All right. And both these numbers were numbers that did you provide those to the Saginaw Police Department?
Oh, yes, they've had those numbers, yes.
Right. Now, we're going to get to some things leading up to the Parham murder, just some contact that you had with Davion. Now, again, you had some regular contacts after Brandon died. Brandon was murdered. And then up until the time of the Antonio Parham murder, you had some regular contact with Davion, correct?
Yes, I did. Mhm.
Now, at some point, well, let me ask you this. Did you have a firearm at that
Yes.
time?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What type of gun was it?
It was a Smith & Wesson 40, I believe, is black, silver, grayish color.
And I'm showing you what's in marked.
Yes. Mhm. That is a Smith & Wesson 40. That was my gun.
And is that a true and accurate representation of what the gun looked like?
Yes, it is. Mhm.
Now, if you can, just explain the circumstances as to why we have a photograph of your gun.
No objection, Judge.
Because I was
Hold on.
Just one
feeling.
second, Ms. Curtis.
Oh, sorry, Judge.
Question improperly phrased. Chiefs to explain. They have a.
Rephrase your question, Mr. Sabine.
Sure, Your Honor. So, Ms. Curtis, there is a picture of your gun, and maybe if you can just explain the circumstances of why that was taken.
Because I was feeling really depressed and was having a bad day and just did not want to live. So,
Okay, all right. And so it was kind of symbolic, I guess.
yes, I had sent it to my sister and just told her that I couldn't do it anymore.
Okay. Now, approximately when do you recall taking that picture?
I would say around the 16th or 17th of January, if I remember correctly. It's been so long, but I want to say around 16th or 17th of January
All right,
of 2000. It would have been
2018?
18, yes.
Okay. And then how long did you hold on to it after that?
Hold on to what?
How long did you hold on to the gun after that?
Probably about a week.
And ultimately, what did you do with the gun?
I ended up giving it to Tubbs.
And do you remember specifically what day that would have been that you gave it to him?
I don't recall the exact date.
And Your Honor, just approaching the witness. File. Mr. Just from the line. From line 5.
Yes.
Read to yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Okay.
That helps refresh your
Yes, it does. The 19th or the 20th of January 2018, yes.
As far as the photograph of the gun,
Yes. Mhm.
Mr. Ofer,
No objection, Judge.
Exhibit 9 will be admitted.
and I just have to publish.
That's fine.
Now, why did you have the gun?
I had the gun for protection, just for my own safety, living in Camelot Apartments. So
Okay. And so why did you give it to Tubbs then?
he had asked me for it. He had said that somebody had shot at his window in the family room at his house and that he needed it for protection. So
All right. And so, but you still needed a gun, so what did you do about that?
yes, so I went and purchased one for myself. So I still had one while I was staying out there for my safety.
Now, when you went to purchase the gun, did anyone come with you?
Yes, Davion Tubbs came with me.
In the time that you had the gun, did you ever put a laser sight on it?
No,
No, before I go on, just to make sure I get this in. So you would recognize Mr. Thompson if you saw him today?
Yes.
You see him in this courtroom?
yes,
Can you just identify where he is and an item of his clothing?
yes. Sitting at the table to your left in the gray.
In the gray what?
Gray shirt and gray vest and yes.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Ms. Curtis identified the defendant.
Shall reflect.
Now, you also had, you had a couple of cars, is that correct? Back in 2018, beginning of the year?
Yes, I did.
All right. You know, what kind of cars were those?
I actually had two Chargers. I had a newer Charger, which was a 2017, and then I had an older Charger, which was 2009, that I let my son drive when he was alive.
Okay. Is that Brandon?
Yes, that was Brandon.
And then after he died, did you use that car?
No, I didn't use that car. I drove my new car.
Did it just sit around or did you let someone else use it?
It would normally just sit around and then, yes, Tubbs asked to use it, so I did let him use it.
Okay. And so as far as Tubbs asking you to use it, do you remember what day he did?
I don't recall an exact date. It's been,
That's fine.
okay.
I'll refer you to page 51. This would be the last night, 50.
Okay.
25 and again. Yes.
All right.
That help refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does. Mhm.
Okay. So do you recall the day that you?
Monday, January 22nd, 2018.
Okay. And so, and that's what's reflected in the transcript. Is that by your memory? Is that the right date?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. So we're talking about basically a day or maybe 2 days apologize, either 2 days or 3 days after you gave him the gun, you gave him the car.
Yes, correct. Uh-huh.
Now, what was the reason? Did Mr. Thompson say anything when he asked you for the car?
Yes, he wanted the car. He had a job interview at a sub shop. I want to say Jimmy John's or Subway, if I remember correctly.
Did he say specifically how long he would need the car?
No, he didn't say.
And what was your expectation as far as how long he could have it?
Oh, just whenever, I had my own car. So just kind of as long as I kept in touch with him, he could just use it until he did find work.
And did he ever return it to you?
No, I never did get it back.
And did you ever report it stolen?
No, I did not.
Did Davion report it stolen?
No.
Now, during this time, after you gave the defendant the charger, did you maintain more frequent contact with Davion?
Yes, seeing that he had my car probably a few times a day.
Okay. And so you were talking or trying to get a hold of him a little bit more just to make sure when he's going to give you the car back.
Oh, definitely. And just to make sure that everything was going right. If somebody uses your car, you definitely want to keep in touch with them to see what's going on and what they're doing. And yes, definitely.
All right. So during that period of time, well, let me ask you, you were made familiar with when Mr. Parham was murdered, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
And you may not remember the exact date, but remember it was a little bit after you giving Davion the car,
Yes, I believe the 27th.
January 27th. Okay. On that day, were you contacted by some detectives?
Yes, I was at work and Detective Wortley and Detective Wenzel came up to my work.
Now, let's just focus on that day. Do you remember making any calls to Davion's phone to try and get a hold of him?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. And do you remember ever having the opportunity to talk to him on that day?
Yes, I remember trying to reach him a few times, and I do remember talking to him once, which was around my lunch break.
Okay. And do you remember if you called him or he called you?
No, I called him.
Okay. And do you remember what was said in that conversation?
Yes, I was just checking to see what he was doing, and he said that he was done with my car, that he didn't need it anymore. And I told him I would have to meet him later, to get the keys and whatnot, because I was at work. And that was the end of our conversation.
All right. And then you had called him multiple times before that, is that right?
Yes, that I tried to reach him.
Now, so he wasn't answering his phone. Were you getting the voicemail?
Right, he wasn't answering.
Did that cause you any concern?
No, I mean, sometimes, he wouldn't answer, so I would just keep calling until he did.
Okay. But you did want to know about the car.
Oh,
is that right?
yes. Mhm.
And during that time, so January 27th, between that time and the time that you gave the defendant the car, would you say you were talking to him every day, or was it once every couple of days?
No.
What's the frequency?
Every day, a few times a day, probably.
So it was a little unusual that he hadn't answered his phone on the 27th, hadn't called you back. Did you find that?
Yeah, with him not answering 5 or 6 times with me trying to call in the morning. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, was there some concern there with you?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Now, you were visited by some detectives.
Yes, I was.
You testified, okay. Now, do you remember the names of the detectives?
I believe it was Detective Wenzel and Detective Wortley.
Okay. Now preceding that, you got a call. Sorry, did you get a call from either of them?
I don't recall. I believe they called and said they were on the way up. I can't recall. It's been a while.
All right. In your communication with those detectives, what did they talk to you about?
They came up to my work and they asked me who had my car. That was their first question to me. And I told them that Tubbs Davion had my car. They then told me that a murder had been committed.
Okay. And did they say it was related to the car?
Yes, they did. Yes.
Now, at this point, did you tell them that you would just talk to them, anything about that?
No.
And Tubbs had said something about returning the car. You didn't say anything about that to detective.
No.
Now, after speaking to the detectives, what did you do after that?
We were talking in the conference room and then they wanted me to go back to my apartment complex, follow them. So we went back to the apartment complex and the Charger was being towed with the tow truck.
Okay. And any other communication with the detectives at that point, just on that day?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. And then after that, what did you do? But let me ask you, so you just talked to Davion a little while ago. Did you talk to him again or did you try and reach out to him again?
Yes, I did. I tried to reach out to him a lot
And how did you do that?
by calling him.
And when you called him, what did you get? Did you get an answer?
No, I got a weird recording saying that the number wasn't in service or yeah.
So at this point, how are you feeling?
I'm
Hold on.
upset.
Hold on. I don't understand the relevance at this point. What point is he talking about at this point? Rephrase your question.
So Miss Curtis, after you talked to the detectives and you weren't able to get a hold of Davion, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling scared and upset and I don't know what's going on and I'm trying to reach him and
What did you do? Did you make any other efforts to get a hold of Davion?
yeah, kept calling him, no answer. So I did end up messaging him or what you were emailing him on Facebook.
Okay. And so it's like Facebook
Yeah,
Messenger.
Facebook Messenger, yes.
And were you able to get a hold of him?
He did not respond back, but he did end up coming over to Brandon and Cameron's dad's house the next day.
And is that something that was arranged in the messaging or was that
No.
just something else?
No, mm-mm.
Okay. So it just ended up,
He just showed up, yes.
and then, so you went over to, sorry, what's the name of the person's residence?
His name is Donald.
Okay. And Donald Pennywell then?
Donald Pennywell, yes, correct.
And what's his relationship with you?
He is my twin's father, so yes, ex-husband.
So you two weren't together at that time,
No,
and you're living apart.
yes, we were living apart.
So he had a separate residence. Would you go over to his residence very often?
Yes,
And on this particular occasion, you went over to visit him.
yes, me and my daughter went over there. Yes.
Okay. And then Davion just happened to drop by.
Davion and his cousin, yes.
Okay. And what was his cousin's name?
Garland,
And do you know his last name?
I don't know his last name, no.
Is it Garland Davis?
Objection, Judge.
Any objection?
That's fine. Now, Do you recall what day that was that you met those two at Darnell's residence?
I believe it was on a Sunday, the 29th. If I'm correct, it has been a long time.
I'm going to refer you to page 63. Refer you to page 64 and line 13 down. So,
Okay. Okay. Yes, yes. It was Sunday, the 28th. Sorry. Thought it was the 29th.
so Parham was murdered on the 27th, and that's when you met with the detectives. So it was the next day.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Now, was there any conversation between you and Davion when he came over?
Yes, of course. I asked him what happened.
And did he have any response to that?
Yes, I asked him if he really did kill Tone, and he said that yes, he did. He couldn't stand to see him walking around after what he did to Brandon.
So at that time, when you met him there, you had a suspicion that he could have been involved in killing Parham.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
So you just asked him straight out.
Yes, yes, I did.
And was there anything else that Davion said about that particular move?
Well, I asked him, I said, where is my gun? Did you use my gun? And he said, don't worry about that. He never gave me a specific answer. He just said, don't worry about that. It's long gone. It's not it. I took it as he did something with it, that it wasn't around here.
Did you ever see the gun again?
No, I did not.
What about the charger? Did he tell you anything about where that was?
No,
Or let me rephrase that. Did he tell you anything about what he did with the charger?
no, no,
Did he have the keys to give you back?
no.
Now, while this conversation was going on between you and Davion, was his cousin present?
Garland was there and Donald was there.
And how far away from Davion were you?
We were all, I was probably here and Davion would have been where the lady's sitting, and then Don right there and Garland right next to him. We were close.
Okay, just roughly, were you all within about 10 feet of each other?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay. Were you in the same room?
Yes, in the same room.
And what room were you in?
We were in the kitchen dining room area.
And so, just kind of bring this back, were you in the dining room when Davion actually came to the house?
Yes, I was already in there. Yes.
Okay. Were you with Donald?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay. Were you guys just talking? Is that what you
Yep,
said?
I believe he was cooking something for Kyla, and we were just already in there.
Okay. So is there a door to the outside? where
Yes,
the
a
dining room
sliding
is?
glass patio that goes into the dining room kitchen area.
And is that the door where Davion and his cousin arrived?
Yes, uh-huh.
Now, just let me make sure. Give me one second. And I just want to make sure it's been almost, well, over 3.5 years since this happened, right?
Yes.
Okay, so some things you might not recall exactly, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. So at the last trial, you testified, I asked him what was going on, and he told me that he had killed Tone. So just to make sure, did you ask him point blank, did you kill Tone, or did you ask him what happened?
Yes, I asked him what happened.
Okay. You're sure of that? Again, with the time period, is it possible you don't recall exactly how you phrased the question?
Yes, I probably don't recall exactly how I stated it. Sorry, yes.
All right. But nevertheless, with that aside, is it true that you did have that suspicion that he had been the one who had killed someone?
Yes, most definitely, yes.
And obviously, well, what was that based on, that suspicion?
Objection, Your Honor,
With-
false representation.
Overrule objection.
So again, Lisa, what was the basis for your suspicion?
Well, when the detectives came and told me at my job that a murder had been committed in my car and who had my car,
And did it also, I guess, corroborate that you hadn't been able to get a hold of Davion?
correct, yes.
Now, just as far as your observations of Davion when you met with him, was there anything about how he was acting or behaving that you thought he might have been sick or ill?
No,
Did he have trouble walking or anything like that?
no,
Any coughing that you observed at the time?
no,
Any trouble breathing?
no,
Now, you kind of testified a little bit about your relationship with Donald. So the two of you would get together from time to time. You still weren't living together, correct?
correct, yes.
Did you get along really well? Were you really close with him?
Yeah, we did get along well, yes. Mhm.
And have you been close since then?
Yeah.
Hold it. Since when?
Since that meeting that you had with Donald, have you maintained your closeness with Donald?
I do still, I've spoke to him, but I'm not happy with him right now.
Now, what was Donald's relationship with Davion, if any?
They were close.
And again, Davion has no relation to Donald other than being Donald's son's friends.
Yes, correct.
As far as Garland, so did you have much of a relationship with him?
No,
And but was he blood cousins with Davion?
I don't know if they were blood cousins. I know that they called each other cousins, so I'm not 100% sure on that.
Did you know whether they were close or not?
Yes, they were close. I believe they were living, I believe Garland was living with him.
Now, during this conversation, did you talk to Davion about not being able to get a hold of him by phone?
Yes, I told him I tried to reach him and that, I couldn't reach him. Yes.
Okay. Did he have any response as to why you were unable to reach him?
He didn't have that phone any longer.
Okay. Now, did he tell you that when you were meeting at Donald's?
No, not at that time, I don't think. I don't recall.
Okay, so he told you that at another time?
I believe so.
All right. Now, just as far as when you were talking to Davion at Donald's, do you remember that, him saying anything about where the phone had gone?
No, I don't recall that.
So at that point, he hadn't told you what happened to the phone?
No, I don't believe, not at that point. No, he hadn't. He had not told me.
Now, had you talked to detectives from the Saginaw Police Department since speaking to Detective Wenzel?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, let me rephrase that question. So as of the time that you're talking to Davion about all this at Donald Pennywell's residence, had you had talked to the police department since meeting with Detective Wenzel?
I talked to them the next day.
Okay, so as of that time, you hadn't,
No.
as of January 28th?
No. Correct.
All right. Now, what happened? How did that get set up as far as you meeting with detectives? Are you sure it was the next day?
Sunday was the day that Davion and Garland came over, and then it was either Monday or Tuesday that we went down to the police station. I don't recall the exact date.
Show you that.
John, I can't hear. It's a transcript of what?
This is a transcript of your interview.
Okay.
Just at the top of the first page.
Mhm. Yes.
So, which day was it that you met with the detectives?
It was January 30th.
All right. So the 28th being a Sunday, the 30th would be a Tuesday, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Now, how did it come about arranging to meet with the detectives again?
I was speaking with the detectives and I told Tubbs that he needed to go down there and talk to them. So I ended up taking Tubbs down there with me.
All right. And did the detectives get a hold of you or did you contact the detectives?
I believe I contacted them. I don't recall.
And then when you told Tubbs that, to go with you to meet with them, was that on the day at Donald's or was that after?
No, that was on the Tuesday that, 2 days later,
Okay.
the 30th.
So the actual day you went to meet the detectives, that's when you asked Tubbs to come along?
Yes,
Now, at this point, Tubbs still didn't have that phone, correct?
no.
Okay. And I think you indicated earlier, but if you can just remind us, how at that time were you able to get a hold of Tubbs?
Through Messenger, Facebook Messenger.
Okay. Was there another way that you were able to get?
Garland's phone too.
So when you met with the two, basically it was, you were told that you could get a hold of them through Garland.
Yes, through Garland's phone.
Now, on the day you met with the detectives, do you remember how you ended up getting a hold of Davion?
I believe through Garland's phone. Yes, if I remember correctly. It was either Garland's phone or Messenger, one of those.
Now, how did you end up getting to the police department on January 30th?
I drove.
And how did Davion get there?
I picked him up.
And did anyone else go with you?
Garland was with him, so it was me, Davion, and Garland in the car.
And now, was there any discussion on the way there?
Yes, he told me that he did not have my car, to tell them he did not have my car, and that he left his phone at the hospital, at the doctors, that he didn't have it.
So he told you these things on the way? to
Yes, on the way to the police station, yes.
Now, as far as the car, he said not to, he was telling you to tell the detectives that he didn't have the car.
Yes, he said, I never had your car. He was telling me. That's what I better tell them.
All right, that's how you interpreted it?
Yes. Mhm.
And then as far as the phone, how did you interpret that? Did you interpret that he didn't have the phone? or-
Yes, yes.
Okay. And did he tell you specifically what happened to the phone?
No.
The middle is, this is 8:12, 8 o'clock a.m.
What date, please?
January 30th.
Thank you.
8:12,
Mhm.
and you reach yourself.
Okay.
Did that refresh your memory a little bit?
Yes. Mhm.
And again, we're talking about 2.5 years ago. So if there's some you don't remember exactly, don't worry about it.
Okay.
But just to clear this up, I just want to make sure. So when Davion was talking to you about his phone, did he say anything specific about what happened to it?
Just that it was at the hospital, that, yeah.
Okay.
But as far as what happened at the, or if he got it back or where it was, just that it was at the hospital, that's all I knew.
And this is when you're driving to the police department? He told you that?
Yes, yes.
Now, how did you interpret him telling you that?
That I better tell the detectives that he didn't have my car and that he lost his phone, that his phone was at the hospital. That's how I took it.
All right. So you didn't interpret it as him telling you he actually left it at the hospital? Is that what you're saying?
No, no.
Now, when you got to the police department, were the detectives aware that you and Davion were both present?
Yes. Mhm.
And did they then interview either of you?
They interviewed me and him, but separately.
Okay. Did they interview you first then?
I believe so, yes.
Obviously you weren't there when Davion was interviewed.
No.
So you don't know. So you went into interview with the detectives. Now, I know this is also, difficult, but you weren't truthful that first time you spoke to the detectives. Sorry, let me rephrase that. You said some things that, you said some things that weren't true the first time you spoke to the detectives. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. Now, at that time, you knew that Davion had told you that he killed Tone.
Yes,
During this first interview, and this is, was it about 8 o'clock in the morning?
yes, it was early, yes.
All right. You didn't tell the detectives that, correct? That Davion had admitted to killing Tone?
No, not in the early interview, no.
And you, in fact, did tell the detectives that Davion had told you that he had lost his phone at the hospital, correct?
Yes, mhm.
And you didn't indicate to the detectives at that time that that was something you believe Davion told you for the purposes of telling the detectives.
Right, not at that time. No.
And you didn't mention anything about actually meeting with Davion, Donald Pennywell, and Garland at that time, in the first interview. Is that
No,
right?
not in the first one, no.
And then with respect to the charger, you told the detectives that Davion didn't know where the key was. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you told the detectives that Davion had told you he didn't know who brought the car back to your apartment.
Correct.
And at that time, you knew that those were statements that weren't true.
Correct.
Now, another thing you told the detectives at that point, not only did you not tell them that Davion had admitted to killing Tone, but you told them that what he had said to you when you asked him if he did that, kill Tone, his response was that he denied, said he didn't do it. Is that correct?
I don't recall, but yes. Okay. All right.
This is January 30th.
Yes, it does.
So, again, with respect to your conversation with Davion about whether he had killed Tone, what did you tell the detectives at that time?
Yes, that he hadn't.
That he said he hadn't.
Right.
Now, had you also told the detectives something about Tubbs giving you Tone's address? The detectives, do you recall that?
No.
Back part of page 14.
Oh. Yes.
Okay. All right. And so you did have information as far as where Tone was staying, correct?
Yes, sorry, I thought you meant about the, where he was killed at. I didn't. But yes, I did get information about him being in Bloomfield, that address.
Okay. And but just to be clear, at that point, you didn't know where Tone had been living exactly.
No, the only thing I knew was that there was a sister or someone out in Bloomfield. That's the only thing I knew at that.
Now, you spoke to the detectives a couple of other times and made some statements that were basically changed your tune, I guess.
Mhm.
Now, when you came back the third time, do you remember the detectives that you talked to that third time?
Detective Dowd and, oh, so hard because it's so long ago. Detective Dowd and Giroux.
And just to help refresh your recollection. Third transcript.
Yep. Yes, it was Giroux and Dowd, yes.
Now, at that time, when you spoke to those detectives, at that point, did you come forward and tell them what Davion had told you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what did you tell them about what he said about the murder?
Yes, that he had killed Tone, that he couldn't stand to see him walking around after what he did to Brandon.
And did you tell the detectives who was present when he made that statement?
Yes, I did.
And then with respect to the gun, now the subject of your gun was brought up by the detectives at that point. Do you remember that?
Yes. Mhm.
Now, at the beginning, did you tell them that you had given the gun to Davion?
No, I didn't.
All right. What did you tell the detectives?
I believe I had said that someone had took it, if I'm correct.
All right. And that wasn't true?
That wasn't true, no.
And then subsequent to that, do you recall telling the detectives about Davion asking you for the gun?
Yes. Mhm.
And that was true, in fact.
Yes. Mhm.
And then did you tell the detectives about buying a new gun?
Yes. Mhm.
And then eventually, did you tell the detectives that what had actually happened to your gun?
Yes, I did. Mhm.
So you told them that you gave it to Davion?
Yes, I did.
And at that point, were you being truthful?
Yes, I was. Mhm.
Now, at the conclusion or at some point while you're talking to Sergeant Dro and Detective Dowd, did you give any kind of written statement?
Not a written statement. I had wrote something down on paper to help remind me of exactly what took place on each date. So some notes, maybe. Yes. Yes. Yes, this is what I wrote, yes. Yes, yes, it is, uh-huh. Yes. Yes, it is, uh-huh. Sorry, I thought it was more like notes. So,
And then it came up.
Excuse me, may I approach, Judge?
You may. My clerk, please. You can be seated. Ms. Curtis, if you can wait outside, the courtroom nurse, the chair is right outside the door there.
Okay.
Amen.
okay.
Thank you. And if you have to go to the bathroom, you can do that now as well. All right. The record should reflect the jury is not present at this time, nor is the witness. Mr. O'Farrell, you approached the bench when Mr. Fedoruk was talking about proposed exhibit 67.
Yes, Your Honor. Honor, this is 4 pages, the date of January 30th. First, it has the 29th, and then it's crossed out and said the 30th of 18. These were referred to in the preliminary examination by Ms. Curtis that she had made notes. And I asked her if she had them available, or if she had them, and she said she would give them to the prosecutor so that the prosecutor could give them to me. That's in the transcript of the preliminary examination back in May of 18. In the second trial that we had, she was asked by the prosecutor about whether she had any notes. And she indicated that she thought she had given them to the prosecutor. And there was an interchange between as to whether she had or had not. But they have never been provided to me, which is the bottom line. I've made 7 motions for discovery in this case. And these documents have never been furnished to me. And in fact, it's been indicated that they didn't exist. And I don't know where they came from today as to if the prosecutor has any explanation as to why they're not, this isn't marked as evidence or time-stamped or any indication other than the hand printed and signature today. So I have no idea where this came from, and it violates every, the court knows what's happened here.
Yeah, I'm curious myself. We've had the 3rd trial in this particular matter. I wasn't present, of course, as presiding judge of the preliminary examination. I know you've made 7 requests for discovery, and those notes have never been provided. So, Mr. Fedoruk, shed some light on this for us, would you please?
Your Honor, so what Mr. O'Farrell's holding, which exhibit number is it?
67.
67. So I previously had a photocopy of this, and I had actually introduced it at the other trials, or at least asked Ms. Curtis about it. This is a written statement. A copy of that had been provided to Mr. O'Farrell. I would ask Mr. O'Farrell to look through his discovery. This will be like a photocopied copy. What I had indicated to Mr. O'Farrell previously is we do have a written statement. He was asking for something other than notes.
Wait a
And
minute,
if you look in the,
wait a minute. Statement, notes, how do you distinguish the two? What is that? Is that a statement or a note?
this is written,
I want to know how you define that. Is that a statement or a note?
it's a narrative as to what has occurred.
Okay, but
It
listen
could-
to my question. You had said Mr. O'Farrell requested a statement or a note. I want to know how you define that, as a statement or a note.
The only way I would define that is this was brought up in the preliminary examination.
Listen to my question. How do you define that document, as a statement or a note?
It
How
could
do
be-
you define it?
The way I'm defining it is how it's been described in the past.
How is that? Is it a statement or a note?
It gives a statement of Ms. Curtis as to what had occurred, and then the information summarized as to what she gave to the.
And you
law
indicated that Mr. O'Farrell was requesting notes. Is that how you started this conversation?
Mr. O'Farrell indicated in his discovery motions that he was requesting some notes that Ms. Curtis had turned over to our office or the police department.
Which is that?
And I acknowledge, well, what I'm saying, this was provided to Mr. O'Farrell,
Okay,
and it was in a photocopied form,
okay.
and like I said, I had the photocopied form previously, and I'd indicated to Mr. O'Farrell, look, this written statement, she's only given one written statement.
Is that it?
This is the only thing we have from her. We have nothing else from her.
Okay.
And I'd indicated that to Mr. O'Farrell in the past, that all we have is this one written statement. And if you look through the preliminary exam testimony, there's a reference, I believe, to a statement, and then there's a reference to some notes. And Mr. O'Farrell's asking about some additional notes that she gave the prosecutor. In that examination, as Curtis indicated, yeah, I gave him some notes. Upon clarifying with her, she said, no, I was confused by the question. The only thing I gave law enforcement was this statement. She was confusing notes and statement. And as the court's pointing out, I guess it can be used interchangeably. This could be referred to as notes or a statement. The bottom line is that this, now that I look at it, this is the same thing that I had a photocopy of. That I was missing that last night, and so I asked Detective Jacobs to provide another copy, so he gave me this one. This is the only thing we've received from Ms. Curtis.
Well, that's the original, looks like.
It is the original, yes.
Okay. And so you're saying that Mr. O'Farrell received a photocopy of that.
Correct.
When did he receive that?
This would be before I even took over the case. This would be at the preliminary exam stage, as soon as he got the case.
Mr. O'Farrell?
No, that's wrong. I've never gotten a judge. I thought Mr. Fedoric said first that he gave it to me, which the discovery that I picked up is from the desk at the police or at the prosecutor's office. It's always got the number of pages because they bill me for it. And I'm showing, I have in my hand, Judge, the email communications that are an exhibit. They've been admitted twice in this case, and I intend to cross-examine the witness about them. She raised the issue in the preliminary examination, which was conducted by Mr. Ruffin, referring to these notes, and she said she would give them to the prosecutor and then that I would be getting them. When I got the transcript of the preliminary examination, that's one of the things that I've mentioned in my previous motion for discovery. Where are they? Do they exist? I've made that as clear as I can each time. In the second trial that we had in this case, Mr. Fedoric questioned her about that, as to whether she had given it. And she said she thought she did, and there was an interchange about whether she had or had not, but there was absolutely nothing about an original or a copy or giving me something until this is brought out today. And Your Honor, as an officer of the court, I will let anybody go through my discovery that I've had. I have never seen what is being produced today.
Mr. Fedoric, if you had these notes before today and Mr. O'Farrell had them before today, I'm curious as to why you never mentioned this in the first or second trial. Why you never moved this as an exhibit? If you had that information, why didn't you use it the first or second trial?
My recollection is I had introduced.
Go ahead.
My recollection is that I had introduced this statement at the prior trials. It didn't look like this because it was a photocopy of it.
So you had that as an exhibit at the prior trial?
That's my recollection.
Well,
I could be wrong. Now I'm put on the spot. All I can tell the court is we've always had this.
no, I don't want to know about you always had it. The problem is he probably hasn't always had it. So my question is, if you had two other trials in this particular matter, I've never seen that in the first or second trial, I'll tell you that. And when I was told it was marked as an exhibit today, I said, that's going to be problematic because I've never seen that exhibit, photocopy, original, or otherwise. In two previous trials, I've never seen that. And so he's saying he's never seen that. And so my question to you is, if you've had this for two previous trials, why didn't you use it at that time?
Again, Your Honor, I can't recall what I did at the other trials with it. It was more, at this point, it's more of an acknowledgement that Ms. Curtis did provide a written statement.
All right,
I would have to go through the transcript.
that's all right. We wasted enough time on this. I'm not gonna let you get into that at all. We wasted enough time on this because he hasn't seen it. I haven't seen it. This is a third trial. You may have had it, but I've never seen it. You didn't use it at the first or second trial because he would have had it as well and you've done something with it. So I tend to agree with him. He's never seen that. I haven't. So anyhow, we wasted enough time on this non-issue. Anything else? While the jury's out, let's talk about it.
What do we tell the jury now about this?
Nothing. They don't know what's in there. What do we tell them? That there's some handwritten notes from Miss Curtis that we're not gonna let you read? What do we tell them? It's like any other exhibit. If it's not admitted, we don't talk about it.
Then the only other thing I would do, Your Honor, is I would move for a mistrial because of the direct disobedience of the orders of this court in regard to discovery.
That's denied. Anything else?
I don't think I need anything else for the record, Judge.
Okay. We'll take a short break and bring the jury back in.